How many Nimons did you see today?
3! I've seen 3!
How many episodes of the Horns of Nimon did you watch?
4! I saw 4!
Okay, you watched the whole story, that's good. Okay, what's 3 plus 4?
7! 3 and 4 make 7!
Okay, could you just repeat those 3 numbers for me again? 3, 4, and 7.
3, 4, 7.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
Huh?
That information will prove most helpful.
Wait a second. This scene reminds me of a scene from season 12, not season 17.
Excellent work, Nida. But Davros, I don't get it. Why are we doing a scene from a story from season 12, not a scene from a story from season 17? I mean, it is a season 17 story review that we're doing a sketch for. Because, Nida, the scene that this sketch is based on is from a story that's much better than the story it's being made for. Besides, I am in season 17 as well. Okay, that makes sense. Anyway, once this review is completed, we'll be able to finally watch the 2 versions of the unbroadcast final story.
3! There's actually 3 versions of that story.
Yes, but we'll get to the 3rd version in the wilderness years. So we're going to have to wait a few more seasons, and then we'll get to it.
Okay, point taken.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 17 Story 5, The Horns of Nimon. This is basically a nothing story. I'm sorry, it's basically the image of the Fendal of Season 17. It's nothing. There's literally no plot and little of substance to enjoy about it. I don't really care for it. It's just another filler, it's another uninteresting story. The plot sees this pilot, or co-pilot rather, he's a big prick, transporting these sacrifices to a planet so they could sacrifice them to these creatures known as the Nimon, so they would get scientific technology, and they would not attack the planet that the sacrifices are coming from to do. So yeah, not really that interesting, is it? And Doctor and Marna get caught up in these events. And it turns out that the Nimon are actually planning to take over the planet of these people. So, yeah, surprise there. Yeah. It's not anything new. And, yeah, I don't really care. I mean, the story is also too bloody long. It's 101 minutes in total. The last episode is 26 minutes and 45 seconds. So it's nearly 27 minutes. That's already too long. Some of the episodes of this season have already been just over 25, 26 minutes. They've been a bit too long. But this episode, the last episode, 27 minutes. That is too long for this story. For that episode, they don't need it to be 27 minutes. Nearly. There's plenty of scenes that could have been removed to shorten the episodes, especially that last one. The stuff in the TARDIS in part 1 certainly could have been cut down a little bit, and the cliffhanger could have been avoided altogether. They could have just had the cliffhanger be, oh, there's more than one Nimon, and not worry about the Doctor and K9 being stuck in a little, having a planet fly towards them. They could have just got their way out of being stuck in the next episode. There's also the weapons in this story. They're a bit inconsistent. Sometimes they kill, sometimes they just stun, and not for very long in some places. The Nimon's plan isn't that much interesting, and I feel sorry for the guys who had to wear those costumes because their heads look like they would cause the creatures to topple over. They're big heads, but the bodies are pretty normal sized. So I feel sorry for those guys because I feel like they're going to fall over at some point. The guy who's playing Soldeed, this character here, he looks like he's having a good time, and he honestly brings the best stuff of the episode because he's so camp. He's pretty much enjoyable. He's so entertaining. But that's as far as I'll go with him. Tom Baker and Lala Ward continue to give great performances as the Doctor and Romana. I'm glad to say, Romana does get sort of captured at one point by the Dick co-pilot. In fact, the only story that she's not gotten into some sort of trouble with was Nightmare of Eden. She didn't get kidnapped, she didn't get captured, and she didn't turn into a typical damsel in distress, which is a reason why Mary Tam decided not to renew her contract and play the character again for this season, because she felt the character had been... she originally hesitated from playing the role to begin with, but then found out that she was going to come from the Doctor's home planet to be a bit more cleverer. But by the end of the season, she felt that the character had returned to a bit more of the damsel in distress. And yeah, apart from Nightmare of Eden, Romana, both incarnations, has been a bit of a damsel in distress, or captured or kidnapped. That's what I've been saying about all this time with the character. She's supposed to be the smart one, but she keeps getting into these situations, apart from last time with Nightmare of Eden. This time, and next story, she's going to get into a situation as well with Shada for a bit, although that one is probably the least worst for plot reasons. Same for City of Death will be the next worst for plot reasons as well. Actually, I think City of Death is the least worst, then Shada. And also, just remembering now, a few other bits that could have been cut from part one, and maybe a few other bits could have been removed, and just the scenes with the sacrifices. There's one of the girls is saying, "Oh, this guy, the prince, he's going to kill the Nimon and save the day." They could have cut a couple of that, and there's this bit about the prince basically admitting what his story is. Turns out he's not really a prince. He was a runaway and then got adopted by the king, by the sounds of it, or something. I don't know what's going on. Again, something that could have been cut, or just not bothered to have in. If you're not going to expand on it, then don't bother. I don't know what was going on. And the people on the planet, I don't really care about those. They're not that interesting. Just this typical war-like creatures. Well, not war-like creatures, but empire builders. And I'm not so worried about the Nimon. They're not really that much interesting. Some people like them, but not sure how. The design is interesting, but the execution isn't that great. Have we had a figurine in the figurine collection of them yet? I think maybe it must have. Or is it on the way? I'm just wondering. Might be on the way, actually. But they themselves aren't that great. And I just don't really find the story that interesting. It's a nothing story. It's not very good. It's nothing. It's a nothing story. So I'm going to give the Horns of Nimon, I was going to give it a 5 because of the enjoyment of this camp character. But thinking about it, it's a nothing story. It's even more nothing than Image of the Fendel. At least that one had some good gothic horror and some decent side characters and good performances throughout. Whilst this one is... it feels worn out. Not in the same way as Destiny of the Daleks, but it feels worn out. In a not too sim, but on a story basis, it feels worn out. Destiny is more of a production value worn out, whilst Horns of Nimon is a more story based worn out as a story. So yeah, I think the story could have been handled a lot better in the execution as well as the script. And it's written by Anthony Reed, the former script editor. The script editor for season 16 and the second half of season 15. And yeah, I don't think he should come back. Yeah, if this is going to be his actual story, a bit like how Pirate Planet was Douglas Adams' story when not being a script editor, and Terrence Dicks with Horror Fang Rock, and Robert Holmes outside of seasons 12 to 15. But unlike some of those stories, doesn't quite work. I mean, some of the others haven't quite worked as well, but this one just, I don't know. It's a nothing. It's a nothing story. And also something I forgot to talk about with Nightmare of Eden was, during that story, the director of that story had an argument with Tom Baker, a bit like producer John Wiles did with William Hartnell during season 3, which led to the director leaving midway through the production of Nightmare of Eden, meaning Graham Williams, the producer, had to take up the directional responsibilities for the rest of the story, and that entire experience just made him decide to leave the show after the end of the season. And considering that the story after this one, the season finale, was not completed and not broadcast, then Horns of Nimon is technically the season finale of season 17, and therefore Graham Williams' final story as a producer and Douglas Adams' as script editor. And boy, is this a disappointment to go out on. This is probably the weakest story for a producer or script editor to exit on. Well, apart from Space Pirates. But yeah, that is a big disappointment. So I'm going to give the Horns of Nimon a 4 out of 10. Yeah, as I said, feels worn out on a story basis as opposed to Destiny of the Dykes, which feels worn out on a production basis. And with Destiny, if it was a production problem with this story, I could understand that because it's to the end of the season, they were running out of money, whilst Destiny of the Dykes, it was only the start of the season or early on into production. I don't see how the problems could have arose there, whilst here I could understand, but on a story basis, it just doesn't quite feel that good. And if the story's not working to their advantage, then how's the execution going to turn out? Yeah, there are the cases where execution saves the day or stops it from being a complete failure, such as Hellbent. I mean, that is one of the worst stories. That is the second worst story of all time, in my opinion. But it does have its merits, such as great direction and great visual effects. And some great acting, whilst some better stories don't have that. Which is something I think the new series handles better than the classic stories. Even if it has a terrible story, they will have some more good points. Not just the visual effects, but they also have some great direction and or acting for the most part. Whilst classic series sort of struggles with that, if it's a bad story or a weaker story, then it sort of struggles with the simpler things to get right, then more so than the more difficult things, like the visual effects. So yeah, that's season 17. That's technically finished with one of the weakest season finales in the show. It's a nothing story. I'm sorry. So yeah, that's basically the Graham Williams era of the show, and the Douglas Adams era as well as script editor. Boy, was this not a very good season for them to handle to go out on, or if Adams' case is just not a very good season to start with either. So season 17 is officially come to a close. However, technically, it's not quite finished yet. Because that unbroadcast story wouldn't be forgotten about. There would be attempts to make it see the light of day. There would be attempts to finish it. And whilst there wasn't really anything that successful in the earlier years, there were ways to bring it back to screens. So before we jump into season 18 or the season 17 ranking, we've got one more story to take a look at. The the incomplete Doctor Who story, Sharda. This is a season finale. This is how you end the season. This is, honestly, I know some people aren't so keen on it, but honestly, this is how the season should have ended. And my goodness, is it a good one. And we'll be taking a look at both the 1992 VHS linking material version, which I've recently rewatched, and the 2017 animated edition, which A, I've already reviewed, but I'm going to rewatch it and re-review it anyway, and B, I'm going to rewatch it before the review. So, next time, Sharda. And the reason I'm using both DVDs is because the DVD of this one doesn't include the VHS linking material. You have to get the Steelbook Blu-ray for that, and the same for the 2003 webcast, which you can get on this release as well, but can only play on a computer. To be honest, it didn't really want to play on my computer either for some reason. It's a bit of a stubborn thing, to be honest. But yeah, and so I'll be using both DVD. I'll have both DVDs with me for my review because they both have the separate versions on them, and the 2017 DVD doesn't have the VHS version on it. You have, like I said, you have to get the Steelbook Blu-ray for that. After that, we'll move on to the Season 17 ranking, and then we'll go on to Season 18, which starts with the Leisure Hive, which is technically the next story, but as we're going to do Sharda first, then Leisure Hive will follow that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for Sharda. But before we do Sharda, there's one more video we have to do, and that is a ranking of Doctor Who 1970s stories, because Horns of Nimon Part 2 was the last episode to be broadcast in the 1970s, and Part 3 was the first to be broadcast in the 1980s, which makes it eligible to go onto 1970s and 1980s story lists. I can assure you it's not going to be on either of them, their lists, but it was eligible. Just had to be good to be on them, but oh well. Same goes for the End of Time. Parts 1 and 2, they have stories eligible to be on the 2000s, mid to late 2000s, and 2010 ranking lists due to having an episode in 09 and an episode in 10. It's eligible for both lists. Whether it's on both lists, whether it's even on the list themselves is to be seen, but it's due to having an episode in one decade and an episode in another decade, it's eligible, if you know what I mean. It's like if Spearhead from Space episode 1 was in 1969, then that story would be eligible for the 60s list, and probably would be on that list as well, by the way, as well as the 70s, if you know what I mean. Or if there was and also with Sylvester McCoy had done if there was a fourth season with Sylvester McCoy, if the show wasn't cancelled after season 26, then there would be the 1980s ranking list would have come after Survival and before, I think it was Earth-Aid, that was going to be the first story of season 27. So that would have happened then, but 27 didn't come, so we're going to have the 80s ranking, then the 7th Doctor ranking after Survival. So we're going to have the 80s ranking after the 7th Doctor ranking, like we did with the 60s one after the 2nd Doctor's. But 4th Doctor's ranking is going to be after season 18, which will follow this, the 70s ranking, which is going to precede Sharda, and 17th ranking will be after Sharda. And also with the mid to late 2000s ranking, that will be after the End of Time, but precedes the 10th Doctor ranking for those same reasons. So, and same for any 13th Doctor's stories from any sneaky 2019 stories after Resolution broadcast before the new year would be a post series 11. It would be during the season 12 series 12 reviews. This is unlikely to happen, but just in case. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Sorry for the extension of the end of the review. Farewell.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official
Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. This is the image of the Fendal of season 17. Oh, you were waiting for me to talk before you burped. Prick. And this is the image of the Fendal. And it also turns out that oh, fuck you. Sometimes you'll have terror. So if you have a terror, the script editor for the second half of season 15, second half of season 15, and for most of and throughout at all. Yeah, and if this is how he's gonna, if he's gonna write a story like, a bit like how Douglas Adams had can Robert Holmes with pretty much anything that outside of seasons 12, 13, 14, and the first half of 15. Is it 12? Outside of 12, 13, 14, 15. Outside of seasons 12 to 15. And going back to Nightmare of Eden, the direct, and considering that the story after this one was unbroadcast, it was unfinished and unbroadcast. Well, completely originally. And considering the story after this one was incomplete, so and however, this is uncertain, unlikely.
How many Nimons did you see today? Wait a second. You're not in... How many episodes of the night did you watch How many episodes of the Horns of Nimon did you actually watch? Okay, that's the whole story. Good. Now, what's 3 + 7? Shit. Okay. Thank you. That's all we needed. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Sean's car is a dusty one as well. Excellent. Because neither this story that we're basing the scene. Because neither the story this scene is being based on is a much better story than the story this sketch is being based on is much better than the story that it's being for. So, yes. Anyway, in the meantime, now that this is done, once its review is done, we can finally move on to the 2 versions of the Anyway, once this review is over, we can finally move on to the unbroadcast story, and we'll have 2 versions
Anyway, once this story is... Anyway, once this review is finished, we'll be able to go... Fucking hell.